Hey there, Shakers, and welcome back to another episode of Worth Your Salt, the podcast that's here to supercharge your marketing in the health and wellness space. I'm Jennifer Oraqua, a StoryBrand certified guide, and over the past 2 decades, my team and I have tested, iterated, and learned what works in marketing so you don't have to. Now I'm here to help you apply the marketing systems that truly succeed. At Salt Marketing, we're all about helping health and wellness practitioners like you build trust, authority, and a nonstop flow of clients. So if you're ready to take your marketing to the next level, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Now, my guests here on Worth Your Salt may make this look easy, but podcast guesting is more than just chatting on a mic. It's a chance to amplify your message, establish your authority, and reach the people who truly need to hear what you have to say. In the health and wellness industry, where authentic connections are key, podcasts provide a powerful platform to build trust and showcase your expertise. Showing up and sharing your story is only one part of what makes podcast guesting so effective. It's about strategically positioning yourself to create lasting impact. That's where podcast interview marketing comes in, a refined approach that turns guesting into a growth-driving strategy for your business. That's why I'm really looking forward to talking with Chloe Williamson today. Chloe is with a company called Interview Valet, and she's an expert in podcast interview marketing. Chloe doesn't just help you get booked. She helps you leverage each podcast appearance to its fullest potential, turning it into a powerful tool for brand authority and audience engagement. With experience working across diverse health and wellness brands from primary care to skincare experts, Chloe understands how to craft impactful podcast interview marketing that resonates deeply with your audience and drives tangible results. If you're ready to elevate your practice by stepping into the podcast world with purpose, Chloe is here to show you how. Chloe, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer. I am so excited.
So, Chloe, first of all, what makes podcast guesting such a powerful tool? And I want to get specifically into for wellness practitioners.
I know that when it comes to wellness practitioners, things like traditional social media can be a bit, I will say, daunting. I will also just say some of them tend to hate the idea of it in general. It's maybe not even daunting. It's just distasteful to them. And podcast interview marketing is a little bit different because it ultimately is a partnership between you as the podcast guest and the host. So that's already a network that you've made there. You're getting access to their audience and any like tertiary audiences that are also listening in on that. Ultimately, you're getting content. So it could also turn into content marketing, which is different than other traditional forms. Ultimately, it opens a lot of doors for how you want to market yourself. And it's more than just an interview. It's more than just talking to a person and just saying, answering questions back and forth. It becomes a relationship. And that kind of relationship can turn into so many different kinds of things. So there's lots of prongs to it. And it's not one size fits all. It can be catered differently to however you want to do it, different styles, different anything. No matter what you do, podcast interview marketing, there is a market out there for you. And it's a great way to break into it.
So let's get into a little bit about how being a podcast guest can help wellness practitioners establish authority and credibility like in their niche.
Well, ultimately, the more you talk about something, the more people are going to hear. So that can lead way into thought leadership. It helps you seem like an authority because you're not just walking the walk, you're also talking the talk. That tends to be the first step for people. But if you're not actually saying anything, who knows what you have to say? So it leads in its way to thought leadership and credibility because, you're putting yourself out there. You already have to believe in yourself to do it in the first place. So that first step is taken care of for you. They're going to believe you because they're listening to you. And it just opens the doors for them to find out more about you. It's anybody could just see a 30-second advert or an Instagram reel or something short that can kind of grab their attention. But the lasting impact is not necessarily going to be there because there's nothing more to go off of. Whereas a full conversation, there's so many things you can pull out of that can really be meaningful to the audience.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And plus, being able to answer those questions and, provide more information as opposed to just seeing an ad, that makes a lot of sense. Now, a lot of the practitioners that we work with are, I don't want to say they're stuck, but they're using traditional marketing. And they get very frustrated with the return there. What would you say to someone who is skeptical about the ROI of podcast guesting compared to other methods?
I would say right off the bat, and this is not a fun answer, but we'll get to that too. Right off the bat, it is a longer game than I think people want to think it is. I think there's a bit of a misconception that it could be like a get rich quick scheme or like an overnight success story from podcast interview marketing. And it could be. There's nothing that says it couldn't be. You could create great stardom from that, but it still has to be a methodical approach and it still has to be a a marketing strategy. There has to be strategy in it. Best thing about podcast interview marketing, in my opinion, is that other than the networking and all of that I already mentioned, it's going to give you content because you will have that interview forever. It's going to be evergreen. And barring anything like scientific breakthroughs that debunk what you're talking about, but I mean, that's not likely to happen most of the time. Otherwise, you can use it. A podcast interview you had 2 years ago, you could still bring up if the information is relevant. And anything from that interview can turn into content. A single sentence could become an entire marketing campaign if it was impactful enough in that interview.
Interesting. So what about for established wellness brands? How can podcast guesting sort of contribute to building that authentic relationship where they've already got a presence on social media? They might have a decent number of followers. How can podcast guesting enhance what you've already got?
Well, you used a very key word there with authentic. I do think authenticity is a big factor that sets aside podcast interview marketing from traditional marketing. Think about how many times you've watched an interview with a celebrity, even if it was just like a 15-minute interview, you tend to feel like you knew them, like you knew them more after the fact. And it's because an interview, if you're a listener or an audience member, you feel like you're getting an exclusive look into this intimate conversation. And it doesn't matter if 40,000 other people are also listening to it. It doesn't matter. It's the psychology of the situation. And that kind of intimacy, that kind of even vulnerability, and whether you're actually getting vulnerable in the conversation, it doesn't matter because it's the one-on-one. That can really set you aside from someone else in your field doing the exact same thing who doesn't have that kind of exposure to share. Because, I mean, think about it in terms of like a doctor's office. Your doctor tells you something. A lot of times you're going to think, well, I want a second opinion. And if the person with a second opinion has a long form content, like a podcast interview that can really expand on everything that you have questions about, they're probably more likely to go with that person than the first person, even if the opinion is the same. Even if it's the same opinion, if they have more to go off of, that really sets you aside. It makes them feel like you're a trusted source rather than just another person out there trying to get their money.
Yeah. And I love that word trust. And that's what we talk about a lot, is building trust with your audience. And I think that podcasting lends itself to that in a very unique way that no other form of marketing can possibly touch.
Absolutely.
All right, Chloe, we need to take a quick sponsorship break right now. But when we return, I want to talk about how Interview Valet can help make the most of podcast appearances. Stay with us. Hey, wellness practitioners, are you ready to scale your practice and deepen your connection with your audience? One of the best ways to do that is by incorporating video testimonials into your marketing. But let's be real, it can feel a little daunting, right? And that's why I've got just the thing to help you get started. We've put together a quick and easy tip sheet with everything you need to feel confident about creating video content that actually works for your practice. From location and lighting tips to how to get the best audio and video quality, spoiler alert, your iPhone is more powerful than you think, to presentation tricks that make you look like a pro on camera. Want to get your hands on these game-changing video tips? Head to saltmarketing.co/video and download the free tip sheet today. That's saltmarketing.co/video. You'll be ready to engage your audience, build trust, and grow your practice all through the power of video. We're back here on the Worth Your Salt podcast with Chloe Williamson of Interview Valet. And so, Chloe, for practitioners who aren't quite sure where to start with podcasting, what's the first step in finding and getting booked on the right podcasts? And by right, I mean like the podcasts that are going to bring them results.
I really want to highlight that last thing you just said there. I need anyone listening to understand. We say this at Interview Valet, but it means a lot for anyone listening. Bigger is not better. Better is better. Just because a podcast has 50,000 listeners, if 48,000 of them don't care about what you're talking about, what are you really saying? It doesn't matter. You have to really find what the right audience is for you, the people that actually care what you have to say. And even more, if we're talking about the business side of it, the people that are going to probably pay you for your expertise past that. So shamelessly, I will say, if you want to take guesswork out of it, you can certainly look into an agency like Interview Valet, where we could do that for you. But even beyond that, I would say do your research. What are podcasts you listen to? What kind of people do you think are listening to that? Sometimes hosts will put that information out there. They'll say what their kind of demographics are. I don't think those nitty-gritty details are necessarily going to make the difference. But what podcast do you listen to? What podcast do your colleagues listen to? People who have been featured on those podcasts. What other shows have they been on? What do they do? You kind of have to do the groundwork to see where the networks lie and which ones you can kind of break into. I think knowing what your audience is going to be is good. And don't put yourself in a box. I would say determine like a primary, a secondary, and even a tertiary. You don't know who wants to hear your expertise until you actually try. You don't know what's going to work. So start there with your target audience. I would also say determine what you actually want to get out of podcasting. That's a big one too. A lot of our clients are very new to it, so we kind of help them determine that. Are you looking to establish yourself as a thought leader? Are you simply just looking for content for things like sizzle reels or adverts? Are you looking for something like that? Are you looking to expand your network and to find partnerships? Those could all lead to different shows that you're going to be on in different audiences and how the impact can change there.
I want to go back to something that you said a minute ago. How important is it for a guest to align with the podcast audience? Like you were saying, look into what do you listen to, what do your colleagues listen to, but how important is it to align with the podcast audience? How can a wellness practitioner ensure that they're on the podcast is the right fit? If there's 50,000 people there and 48,000 aren't interested, how do we determine who those people are?
Well, I would say determining it is kind of the most crucial thing you can do, because again, if you're in the wrong room, it doesn't matter what you have to say. Another reason I said earlier, it does tend to be a bit of a longer game. And the reason for that is you might have to measure which audiences are resonating more with the results that you want versus others. Some are not going to work out and some are going to be exactly what you want. Now, that doesn't mean that that audience that doesn't work out didn't need to hear what you have to say, but it depends on what you do with the output of all of that.
Okay.
But I would say don't put yourself in a box. To give an example, we had a potential client once. They were a fitness expert and they were really focused on train runners and their form and all of that. And they said when they came to us that they don't really want to be on fitness shows because they're already in the ear of fitness people. And normally that would be a perfectly valid statement. And like, that's, I trust that you believe that and you know that. However, we kind of urged them. We were like, I see what you're saying, but I also know for a fact that weightlifters hate cardio, hate it. Like that's a big stereotype amongst them, and it tends to be true. So by not reaching out to fitness people, you're possibly like leaving money on the table, because who knows what person in fitness that hates cardio is not going to hear that interview and say, they're right. Maybe I've been looking at running the wrong way and I need to like get with this lady who is going to help me figure out the best way to do it. So it's kind of a paradox. You have to know what your target audience is, but you also can't put yourself in too much of a box. You have to be willing to try things out too.
So once you find those right fit podcasts, what are some key elements of your bio or your topic pitch that you should use to stand out and really reach out to those podcast hosts?
You have got to get comfortable with bragging about yourself. That is I know people are groaning even just hearing that. That's a big hurdle we try to come over with our clients. People are not going to think you're amazing if you don't think you're amazing, or at the very least, if you don't pretend that you think you're amazing, because no one actually knows if you're pretending or not. And that's a fact. They don't. Yep. So you have to be comfortable with bragging about yourself. What have you accomplished? What makes you different from other people in your field? How can your advice, expertise, knowledge change someone's life? I would also say in terms of a bio, keep it short. I would say 300 words or less. That's really actionable advice, because as the person who tends to fill out guest forms for my clients, every host wants it to be 300 words or less. So keep it pretty brief. Decide what your best attributes are to put in there. You can certainly put a little bit about your personal life in there. That tends to make a difference too. Just I live in wherever, I have 3 beautiful children, I enjoy this. Just even one sentence can really help set you aside. And as far as topics go, here's some more legitimate advice from my experience. Come up with topics that include a number or are phrased in the form of a question. So if you are an expert on sleep, your topic could be, why am I not sleeping well? Something very simple like that. Because when you phrase it as a question, you're instantly giving relatability to the listeners, because those are questions they've asked a million times. So if you're proposing the same question, they say, great, there's the answer I need. Numbers also really work. So if you're a sleep expert, you could say the 10 reasons you're not sleeping well. People love lists because that's quick, easy information that they don't have to think too hard about. So we have found through years of doing this that topics that include a question or a number tend to get the most attention from hosts and audiences alike. That doesn't mean everyone has to be like that. Come up with as many as you want, get as in depth with it as you want to be, because if you have a lot to say, people want to hear it. So do as much as you want. But I would say if you want some legitimate, actionable advice, think about those 2 things.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the same approach that we take in terms of content marketing. If we're writing an article or shooting a video, those are the same sorts of pieces of advice that we give, but I think people think of podcasting as differently than those. So if you, and I'm speaking for myself here, what if we feel like we don't have the time or the experience to be a guest? What tips can you offer to help people prepare for those appearances?
Okay. In terms of time, really hone in on that, because if you don't have time to be at, the mercy of a host's schedule, that could be really tricky. We like to view when hosts ask guests to be on their show, we kind of view that in Interview Valet as an invitation that you want to politely RSVP to. Mm-hmm. So you're at the mercy of their calendar. There's nothing that says that if you just only have one day to record, we have had people like that. We have been able to work it out, but you do need to make the time. If you don't have the time, you need to make a little bit. This certainly doesn't have to be a full-time job, but just like any marketing campaign, any marketing strategy, it is going to take some effort. So try to make some time. And as far as experience goes, I would say maybe 60 to 70% of our clients have never been on podcasts before. Oh, wow. It's very normal. That's what we're here to help you with. Mm-hmm. Earlier, I said you need to be comfortable bragging about yourself. Another thing you need to get comfortable with is you need to accept that you're going to hate your first interview. You're going to. No matter how prepared you are not going to like your first interview, and you just need to accept it because the next one is going to be better. You are going to walk away with something to learn how to improve the second one.
That's great advice. And so one thing I'm wondering about is, how as guests, and I want to go back to what you said a minute ago about your bio. So, how can we leverage a personal story or a journey to make that impact when we're a guest?
Okay, well, first off, you absolutely should. If anyone listening to this isn't sure if they even want to try that, I really, really recommend that you should, because that is something that's going to set you aside. You may have the exact same knowledge, the exact same expertise, even the exact same training and education as someone else in your field, but only you have your experience and they have theirs. Mm-hmm. They're completely different. And it's also that instant relatability. People want to hear from people that they know that they can trust and they can listen to, or someone who's just like them. Haven't had, how many times have you heard someone talk about something that you've dealt with and you're like, oh, finally, someone who knows what I'm dealing with. And it could be something so simple. You don't have to tell your entire life story or, regale us with an absolute tragedy you've been through. You could, but it doesn't even have to be like a huge undertaking. It could just be that personability and that authenticity that sets you aside.
You said that everyone will hate their first interview. So tell me about some common mistakes you see when people appear on podcasts as guests. How can we avoid those mistakes right out of the gate?
Biggest thing, do your research. Absolutely listen to a few episodes of the podcast you've been invited to be on. You would be surprised how many people don't really consider that they should do that. But I would say you need to do it, one, as a courtesy, because this person's asking you to be on their podcast. So the least you could do is throw some listens their way. I mean, you might as well. Two, do your research in the sense too, how does that host interview? That you don't know who's going to be laid back, who's going to be a little bit more staunch in their approach. Get an idea for that, especially if you're a person who tends to be really laid back. Maybe you don't want to be on a more staunch person's podcast. You want to kind of figure that out. So do some research. A lot of hosts will provide questions before you even record. And I got to give a special mwah to all of those hosts because we love seeing that. It's very helpful for people, especially who have not done it before. Even if the host does not provide that, you are usually more than welcome to ask the host if they could ask you particular questions. We have clients do that all the time. Say, I would love it if you asked me X, Y, and Z. Communication is a big one too, just in general with the host. Set out your goal. You don't know that this host has the same goal in mind as you do when it comes to this. So you could certainly let the host know, I would love if we touched on this. Please don't ask me this. Maybe we can do this. Of course, do it respectfully. This is not your podcast. It's their podcast, but it's a partnership, like I said, and you both have a lot to gain from this interview, not just you, the host does too. So that kind of collaboration can really make all the difference. And of course, technical. Make sure you're in a quiet spot, have good equipment, free from distractions, practice, anything like that.
Yeah, those are all really good advice. And honestly, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years now, and I don't think I've had anybody come to me with their own goals or their own, I wish you would ask me this. I would love that. That would be outstanding as a host.
You heard it here, folks, right there.
Right there, for sure. So I would love to hear some of your most memorable success stories you've seen from wellness practitioners who have used podcast guesting to grow their brand.
I had a client once. Now, to his credit, he was not new to public speaking or storytelling. He was very well versed in those, but he had never done podcast interview marketing. And I think it was only his third interview, an audience member reached out to him with the potential for him to speak at a health summit. So he got a paid speaking gig, literally just from an audience member, not even from the host. And it's that exact thing. Like, you never know who's listening. Like, they're out there. Your people are out there. They just have to hear you.
Very nice. All right, Chloe, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Worth Your Salt podcast, and today I'm talking with Chloe Williamson of Interview Valet about how you can go beyond guesting to drive results with podcast interview marketing. We'd love to connect with you, so be sure to join us over on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and let us know how you're leveraging podcasts to reach your goals. We're back here on Worth Your Salt. And so before the break, we were talking about how to prep for and make the most of podcast appearances. I want to talk a little bit about specifically how Interview Valet helps with that. So you guys have a proven system for podcast guesting, what you call podcast interview marketing, which we've referenced. So how does that approach ensure predictable and measurable results?
Well, the best thing about it is that you're going to have constant consultation because you're going to have an account manager who is going to be tracking everything for you. Number one, I would also say if you're someone who hates the tedious work of any of this, we take care of that for you. So that's a big thing. It saves you time because you're going to be doing it yourself. But even beyond like what we specifically offer when we're talking just about podcast interview marketing, you're going to get that content, like I said, and you can use that anywhere you want. And we help our clients figure out how to apply the certain content that they have. So we help to identify your target audience, which is, like I said, kind of crucial. It tends to be the biggest hurdle for most people. We're going to help you do that. And we do that through research, SEO. We have a lot of proven results for all of that. We're going to help you determine that. We're going to find the shows for you. We're going to facilitate all communication, any of, again, the tedious work that you don't want to do. We help you with that. And then we listen to your podcast after they go live and we provide advice. We provide consultation onto how you can improve this and even further consultation on how you can then promote past that and reach the goals that you're trying to reach.
Nice. So I assume that this all supports practitioners so they can focus on sharing their expertise. I know you have your certified guest training. It would help wellness practitioners not just show up, but actually maximize their time and impact. Can you walk me through that a little bit? Again,
a lot of our clients have never done this before. We offer, it's not, you won't find it on the website. This is just something that the client account managers will offer. We offer practice interviews for anyone who's never done it before. We've done that plenty of times. We can help you because it's nerve-wracking. I mean, I'm sweating right now talking to you and I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like talking into a microphone is very nerve-wracking. So we kind of help you get past all of that. We also really, just like the interview between the client and the host is a partnership, it's also a partnership with us too. You know, you're working with us and we have the same goals that you have. We want you to succeed. So we're here to listen and we're here to advise. We're also here to pivot. We've seen plenty of times where we've had a client say that, you know, I've done a few podcasts with this target audience. I'm not really seeing what I want to see. We have to think of something else. So then from there, we're going to work together and we're going to find where are our niches beyond that we can break into, that we can look at and like kind of switch things up. So it's ever changing and we're always here for the ride.
Yeah, smart. So once a podcast goes live, so you've done the hard part, what steps should a guest take to leverage that exposure and build momentum?
Promote. Okay. I would say even before the episode goes live, after you record the episode, tag the host. You know, Tom, our founder, does this a lot. After he records an episode, he'll get on LinkedIn and he'll say, just had a great interview with Jennifer, and he'll tag the host so that already there's some buzz that this interview is coming out. You're generating that excitement. And then from there, I mean, share it shamelessly. Again, you have to brag on yourself. You know, an interview is not easy. It's, again, I'm sweating just doing this. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of preparation and it's a product of your knowledge and you should treat it as such. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't really view it that way, but like, this is a showcasing of what you know and who you are. And you should be pasting that absolutely everywhere. And again, when I say pasting that everywhere, you have a lot of different options for this too. I mean, an interview can turn into a blog post. It can turn into an audiogram. It can turn into a reel. It can turn into a Substack entry. You have pretty limitless opportunities for what you're going to do with this. You just have to use it. And I think getting creative and figuring out where your most impactful areas are good. For instance, if you find that the people that you work with tend to like long form content, the interview alone is great, but then like maybe turn that into a blog post. I could talk I want blogs to come back in such a real way. I really bring back blogs. I'll scream it forever, but that can turn into something really meaningful. If you have more of a younger audience, maybe short form content is a little more their speed. Look into Reels, look into TikTok. Again, I know people are hearing me say that and they're rolling their eyes at me, but it could work for you. It could be the difference between your audience hearing you and never hearing you.
And there are plenty of tech tools that can help you repurpose your content and create those things so you don't have to feel that tech burden as you.
And we can do that for you at Interview Valet.
Oh, there you go. Very good. And I love what you said about thinking of this as IP. I mean, your podcast interviews are your intellectual property. You're sharing your expertise. That's a really, really good perspective. So for any practitioners who are ready to dive in, do you have any resources or advice that you can offer to help them confidently get started?
Absolutely. Check out interviewvalet.com. Even if you're not trying to sign up with us, we have a ton of free resources on our website, including technical stuff, interview tips, market research. We have so much content on there that can really help you. And if you are interested enough, book a discovery call with us. But even so, I'm not trying to make this a sales pitch. Even so, a lot can be learned from that. And also, like I said, there's a lot of power in research. Is there someone who frequents podcast appearances that you want to be like? What about them do you like? Figure that out, because that could turn into your thing too. Nobody owns the style of podcasting. There's nothing that says that you can't do the same thing.
Interesting. And don't you guys have some sort of assessment that we can take over on the website?
Yes, we do, to find out all kinds of sorts of things. There's a lot of really good stuff on there. Some of it's interactive, some of it's not. I'm telling you, there's a wealth of knowledge on interviewvalet.com. Please check it out. If you're even mildly interested, it could be the difference.
Okay, fantastic. And of course, we'll put a link to the Interview Valet assessment and all those resources over on our website at saltmarketing.co. But right now, it is time for our lightning round questions. These are a few quick questions that I like to ask of every guest. Chloe, are you ready?
I am.
All right. First question is, what's something about you that often surprises people?
A few times in my life when I have told people I'm an only child, they're surprised to hear that. And only children get a really bad rep. So maybe that one, I guess.
Interesting. All right. Next question. What's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
I love menial tasks. Obviously, I love helping people reach their goals. Everyone knows that. I wouldn't be doing it if I weren't here. But I also love digging through a schedule and filling out forms. Most people hate that, and I live for it.
That's
so I love
funny. That. I love that. All right. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Take the money and run. That was my mom's. That was always my mom's go-to. And when I was a kid, I took it really literally, and it could be applied literally, of course. But no, if something is for you, you got to take it. You can't look back. Yeah, I do agree with that.
Yep. It's good in a philosophical sense as well. All right. Last question. Who is inspiring you right now? What podcast are you listening to, or what's the best book that you've read recently?
I'm dealing with a lot of grief in my life right now. So I have been reading The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. I'm also reading Just Kids by Patti Smith. I recommend for anyone, even if you're not grieving. They're very, very beautiful. And as far as podcasts go, it's not active anymore, but I really love 70 Over 70. And that is a podcast series where the host, Max, interviews 70 people over the age of 70. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. They're just so poignant and inspirational and cathartic. And, our society tends to cast aside older people, and more so the older they get. And to put a showcase on that is really powerful, especially because, people over 70 know a lot more than I do. Why wouldn't I want to hear what they have to say? And if anyone listening is interested in checking it out, Twiggy, he has one with Twiggy, the model. That one's my favorite.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'll definitely have to check that out. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of Worth Your Salt.
Thank you. I had the best time.
I also want to thank you, Salt Nation. If you have a great success story, I know we'd all love to hear it. Visit us online to tell us about why you're worth your salt at saltmarketing.co/worthyoursalt. And of course, while you're there, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Finally, leave us a review or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this episode of Worth Your Salt. Be sure to join me again next time. In the meantime, let's get out there and shake things up.